Welcome back to the Taiken Ramen channel. Today we're continuing our summer of fusions and leaning into another American dish, chicken and waffles. Although this is normally served for breakfast in the United States, I do think it might have a future playing nice in a bowl of mazemen noodles. So we're going to give this a shot. Considering that ramen is sort of its own hangover food and chicken and waffles are like a hangover food, this was sort of like ultimate hangover breakfast. Although I don't know what hungover person is going to have the motivation to make something like this. The first draft really was a little bit rough in terms of presentation and flavor. So I cleaned that up in a second draft, and I'll just be talking to you about both throughout this video. Overall, a really good learning experience, and this actually turned out to be my favorite fusion of the summer so far. So let's get cooking. I started by designing the sauce that was going to go in the bottom of the bowl, because that was going to tie everything together, so it just needed to make sense for the whole dish to work. Chicken and waffles is a fun breakfast food because it really combines spicy with sweet with savory, and then it's got that crispy fried element to it, so fun. But the sauce needed to be pretty complex to capture all that. I started with 2 tablespoons of usakuchi shoyu. That's light soy sauce, but it's heavy in sodium content. I added 2 tablespoons of local honey for that nostalgic breakfast flavor, 2 tablespoons of the black garlic aroma oil from the farm to table tonkotsu video. This was good because the butter brought more breakfasty notes while the garlic brought really ramen-y notes, and they kind of met in the middle. I threw in 1 egg yolk for some bari yari yari, 1 teaspoon of salt to wake up flavors, and then 2 teaspoons of ryu Szechuan oil to make sure that the sauce did have some heat to it, as chicken and waffles is typically served with hot sauce. All those components stayed separate until serving when I mixed them all up, but now that the sauce is designed, we can go tackle the other components in the bowl. Sauce complete. Next, I made the noodles. I used Gonya's calculator to calculate out a 40% hydration bread flour based noodle with tapioca and rye adjuncts. The tapioca made it slurpy and soft, and the rye brought a really heavy wheat flavor to the noodle. I used all sodium kansui so that it was more chewy than bitey, and I added a little bit of riboflavin to bring a heavy yellow color to the noodle. I rolled my sheets out to 1.5 millimeter thickness and then starched them down. I cut these noodles with my 1.5 millimeter round noodle cutter, and then after they were cut, I gave these really delicate noodles a soft tomomi massage. That gives them those curls and wrinkles so that they carry more of the sauce. And since the sauce was a critical part of this bowl, I wanted to make sure that the noodles were a good vessel. These noodles rested up at room temperature for 5 days. They only boiled for 1 minute before serving, and that's noodles complete. Next, it was time to make the chicken and waffles, and I will admit this is where the first draft I really kind of messed things up. For iteration 1, I took a chilled chicken breast, and then I dredged it in buttermilk and eggs, and then just flour. I put the whole chicken breast in a 350 Fahrenheit pot of oil, and then I fried this chicken breast in that oil, continually checking the internal temperature until it registered 165. Unfortunately, that took like 3 or 4 minutes. Intuitively, it was already too long to be frying something like that. And then after I pulled it out of the oil, let it rest, tried to cut it into pieces, there were a few problems. First of all, that breading came falling right off. It really wasn't attached to the chicken breast that well. And second of all, if you fry anything for 3 or 4 minutes, it's just going to be super dry. So overall, that was a little bit of a miss. I went and knocked on the sky for some wisdom on the Ramen Network Discord, where it was recommended that I make karaage Japanese style fried chicken. And that was a double win because it also made the whole dish feel a little bit more ramen-y. It was feeling a little bit too breakfast-y on the first iteration. To make karaage, first you cut that chicken breast into smaller pieces so it has to fry for less time. Next, I marinated it in soy sauce, garlic, ginger, honey, and pepper for about 3 hours. Second, you just dredge it in eggs and potato starch. The potato starch makes an extra crispy coating that really sticks to the chicken much more successfully. And then the last thing was I made a sauce out of the frying oil and some spices. So before frying, I made a spice blend out of 1 tablespoon brown sugar, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon cayenne pepper, 1/2 teaspoon each of garlic powder, cinnamon, paprika, pepper, and a chimi togarashi. As soon as the karaage was done frying, I removed it from the oil, and then I took about 200 milliliters of that hot oil, and in a heat-proof bowl, I mixed it in with the spice blend. That created a really luscious, savory, spicy, warm sauce, and I tossed the karaage in there as soon as they were done frying, and that breading soaked up the flavor. It was exceptional. So the chicken was good to go. Then I had to do the waffles. I made a pretty standard buttermilk waffle. The first iteration, I tried to dress it up by using my biscuit cutter to cut it into a biscuit-like shape, so it was a little more bite-sized. Really, the only thing that achieved was making it not look like a waffle. So for round 2, I just made a simple waffle and I just cut it into the quarters like the manufacturers intended, and I just had that triangular waffle shape. That's chicken and waffles complete. For additional components, I made my standard soft-boiled egg, except for the marinade, I did 1 part soy sauce to 1 part honey to 2 parts water. Substituting the honey in for the mirin really drove it in that more breakfast-y way, and I had already compromised on the chicken and waffles to make it more ramen-y, so I was really trying to get these two to play together. And on iteration 1 of plating, I did deep fry the egg, and I'll talk later about why that wasn't a good idea. And then the morning of serving, I did swing by the farmer's market, and I grabbed some sunflower microgreens to bring a little bit of like vegetable flavor to this otherwise very sweet and very savory bowl. And last but not least, I zested up some orange peel and added that to the dish in different ways on the first and second plating, which we'll talk about next because that's additional components complete. When assembling this bowl, I started with the sauce that was described earlier and then mixed that all up. After that, I put in the noodles, and I'll walk through the first plating and then talk about why it was a problem. So you can see here I go for a good noodle fold, but the noodles are pretty much centered, and then I just work my way around the horn and I add in the chicken pieces, the little waffle bites, the deep fried egg, and then the sunflower microgreens and the orange zest. And just staring at this, it's pretty apparent right off the bat. It all kind of blends in to be this brownish, orange, yellow color scheme. And while you do want unity and you want a common theme, there was a lack of contrast in the bowl. Like, just look at the fried egg. The egg, if you cut it in the middle, has deep orange and yellow, and then it's got contrast with white, brown edges if you marinate it. And here I just masked that all by frying it, and you have essentially a brown orange egg that just gets lost in the bowl. Another problem with it is the arrangement of components. It's kind of like all these components are just sitting in a hot tub. Everyone's just hugging the wall. And that's okay sometimes, but in this case, it was creating this sense of motion around the bowl, and then the fact that the sunflower microgreens were pointing inward toward the bowl really interrupted that motion, so that didn't really make much sense either. Overall, just looking at it, something's not right. You can tell something's not right. So this was when I went back to the drawing board and converted from the classic fried chicken to the karaage. I made more waffles and did not cut them into that biscuit shape. And then I took a second shot at plating this. This time when I put the noodles in, rather than having them centered, I tried to move the noodles to one half of the bowl so that they were sharing the space. And this was a really good form follows function moment because it's a fusion dish where you have ramen elements on one side and chicken and waffles on another. So a touch on the nose, but it did end up looking better, so I was committed. After the noodles were in there, the waffles up top made a really good backboard for the karaage to then sort of lean upon. Here on the second iteration of the egg, because it's not fried, you can see all of the colors of the egg. They bring a nice contrast to the bowl. They go on the ramen side of the house. And then finally, the sunflower microgreens and the orange zest, rather than sprinkling it through the dish where it was lost in a bunch of little pieces, I concentrated it all into one lump, so it really stuck out. And then the waffles were looking a touch uninspired, so I gave them some love with a couple dollops of Blue Goose jam that I was gifted by a friend, and then some ricotta cheese. Overall, looking at this presentation of the bowl, you've got the message that this is a meeting of ramen and chicken and waffles. You've got contrast where things are popping and standing out on their own. And oh, by the way, not frying the egg allowed the honey flavor to sing. Redoing the chicken into karaage brought some really intense flavors and fun textures to the bowl. Round 2 was completely necessary on this one, and it's a good lesson learned. If you're ever just looking at the bowl and you go, this isn't right, do not be afraid to go back to the drawing board, because there's probably something good waiting for you in attempt number 2. Digging into this bowl was really satisfying because I had put the work in to do that second iteration. Those tomomi noodles did a great job of carrying the sauce, and those flavors were like a wonderful canvas backdrop to everything else that was popping off the page. By far the best component was the karaage chicken. I'd like make that for breakfast and just eat those like breakfast Japanese chicken strips. Those were mwah. The waffles were necessary, fun. They were lacking a touch of inspiration. I sort of wish that maybe I had put some spices in with the waffle mix just to elevate the waffles a touch. This was a really nice bowl. The orange zest in particular really made everything sing. And considering the fusions that we've attempted this year, which were the coffee ramen, rose water dipping noodles, and then the buffalo wings, this was by far the most satisfying and delicious fusion. And as usual, I'm eternally grateful to the people on Discord for helping me to get it right on the second time. I absolutely destroyed this bowl. I cannot wait to make it again. But there you have it. That's Chicken and Waffles mazemen. Thank you for joining me for another video. It was a pleasure cooking for you, and I can't wait to see you all again next month. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you'd like me to make. And as usual, please consider subscribing for more. See ya.